I abandoned my bride at the altar on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. The white roses were arranged, 200 guests were seated, and somewhere in that church, my abusive parents waited to surprise me, invited secretly by the woman I thought knew me better than anyone else in the world. Instead of saying, "I do," I sat alone in an empty parking lot 15 miles away, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face, knowing I had just made the most devastating and necessary decision of my life. My name is Joseph, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the bravest form of love is walking away. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment I fell for Natalie. We were at my friend's cramped apartment during a birthday celebration, the kind where you can barely hear yourself think over the music. I was hiding in a corner, nursing a beer, when I spotted her across the room. She wasn't the loudest or the most conventionally striking person there, but something about her drew me in immediately. It wasn't just her genuine smile or the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. It was how she listened to people. In a room full of conversations where everyone was just waiting for their turn to speak, Natalie actually absorbed what others were saying, her head tilted slightly, eyes focused, completely present. When our gazes met across that crowded living room, something shifted inside me, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. Our first conversation stretched into 3 hours, just the two of us sitting on the fire escape while the party continued without us. We talked about everything, books that had changed us, places we dreamed of visiting, those embarrassingly terrible movies we secretly loved. But what struck me most was how she listened, really listened, not just nodding politely, but asking thoughtful questions that showed she was truly engaged. By our third date, I knew I was falling hard. By the 6-month mark, I knew she was someone I could imagine spending my life with. And around our 1-year anniversary, I did something I'd never done with anyone else. I told her about my parents. Not everything, of course. Some wounds are too deep to fully expose, even to those we love. But I told her enough. I explained that my father's anger issues weren't just raised voices, but raised fists. That my mother's version of protection involved fabricating stories about why I couldn't participate in gym class or why I wore long sleeves in summer heat. I told her, my voice barely steady, that I hadn't spoken to either of them since I was 18 years old, and that this wasn't some rebellious phase that would eventually resolve itself. This was a permanent, necessary, life-preserving decision. When I finished speaking, my hands were shaking. I'd seen it happen before. The moment when someone decides you're too damaged, too complicated, carrying too much baggage. But Natalie did something different. She took my trembling hands in hers, looked me directly in the eyes, and said, "I'm so sorry you went through that. Thank you for trusting me with this." She didn't try to fix it, didn't suggest family counseling, didn't tell me that blood is thicker than water or that forgiveness would set me free. She just accepted it, accepted me, with all my jagged edges and hard boundaries. For 3 years, this understanding formed the foundation of our relationship. When her parents innocently asked about my family during holiday dinners, Natalie smoothly changed the subject. When wedding planning began and the question of guest lists arose, she never even suggested including them. She understood that some wounds don't heal with time. They just learn to stop bleeding if you're careful enough. Or so I thought. The proposal itself had been perfect. I'd noticed Natalie dropping hints about marriage for months, casually mentioning ring styles she liked, pointing out venues she thought were beautiful. So when I finally got down on one knee in the same park where we'd had our first official date, her tears of joy felt like confirmation that we were building something real, something lasting. Wedding planning was surprisingly stress-free. Natalie had strong opinions about flowers and color schemes, but she always deferred to my preferences on anything that really mattered to me. The guest list seemed straightforward. Her extended family, our mutual friends, and my chosen family of close buddies who'd been there through everything. No drama, no difficult conversations about +1s or seating arrangements. Just the people who genuinely cared about us, celebrating what we'd found together. I should have noticed when things began to shift. The questions started innocently enough, disguised as casual curiosity. "Do you think your parents know you're getting married?" she asked one evening while we were addressing invitations at our dining table, the envelopes spread out before us like playing cards. I set down my pen and looked up at her. "I have no idea, and I don't care." "Why would you ask that?" Her eyes flicked away from mine for just a moment. "I just wonder if they ever think about you, about what they're missing." Something cold settled in my stomach. Natalie, they had 18 years to think about what they were doing to their child. If they were capable of that kind of self-reflection, I wouldn't have had to leave. She nodded quickly, apologetically. You're right. I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't imagine not having my parents in my life, you know? But that's my experience, not yours. I thought that was the end of it. I believed she understood that her loving, supportive family wasn't a universal template. I trusted that she respected my boundaries because they were rooted in survival, not preference. I was catastrophically wrong. The discovery happened entirely by accident, 3 days before our wedding. Natalie was in our living room with her maid of honor, Hazel, finalizing details. I had come home early from meeting with my best man about bachelor party plans. Nothing wild, just dinner and drinks with close friends. And I walked through the front door just as Hazel asked a question that made my blood turn to ice. Are you sure he's going to be okay with you know who's showing up? Does he know yet? I froze in the doorway, keys still in hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. You know who? The only people in my life who required code names were the ones I'd spent years keeping out of it. Natalie's voice was quiet but confident. It's a surprise. I think once he sees them, it'll be fine. It'll make him happy on our big day. Trust me. The world tilted sideways. My keys slipped from my fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a sharp metallic ring that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Both women turned toward me, and I watched the color drain from Natalie's face as she realized what I'd overheard. Hazel mumbled something about needing to leave and practically ran out the door, leaving Natalie and me staring at each other across a chasm that had suddenly opened in our living room. What surprise! My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm, too controlled. Natalie's mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. I can explain. What? Surprise. Each word felt like a stone dropping between us. She took a shaky breath. I invited your parents to the wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, reaching for the wall to steady myself. You what? I thought. I hoped that seeing them there, seeing them proud of you on your wedding day, would help heal things between you. I thought it would be this beautiful, unexpected moment that would bring your family back together. I stared at her, this woman I'd trusted with my deepest wounds, and felt something fundamental break inside me. You thought what? I know you said you didn't want them there, but I couldn't stand the idea of us starting our marriage with this huge piece of your life missing. I've been talking to your mother for weeks, planning this. She's so excited to see you, to be part of your special day. They both are. Each word was like a knife twisting deeper. She'd been talking to my mother for weeks, planning this, behind my back. After everything I'd told her, everything I'd trusted her with, she had decided she knew better than I did what was good for me. Natalie, I had to stop and breathe before I could continue. Do you remember what I told you about why I left? Yes, but do you remember me telling you about the time my father broke my ribs when I was 15? Her face crumpled. Yes. Do you remember me explaining that my mother told the emergency room doctor I'd fallen off my bike? Yes, but that was so long ago and you decided to invite them to our wedding. As a surprise. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Natalie was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. Just a cold, expanding numbness. I thought, she whispered, I thought if they saw how successful you've become, how happy you are, maybe they'd realize what they'd lost. Maybe they'd apologize. Maybe you could have a relationship again. That wasn't your decision to make. My voice came out barely above a whisper. I know, but I love you, and I hate seeing you carry this pain. I thought I could fix it. Fix it. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. You thought you could fix 14 years of no contact with a surprise ambush at our wedding. When you put it like that, how else should I put it, Natalie? You went behind my back and invited my abusers to the most important day of my life because you decided you knew better than I did about my own trauma. She was sobbing now, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Please, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing something good. I thought, if they show up to that wedding, I won't be there. The words came out of my mouth before I'd consciously decided to say them. But as soon as they were spoken, I knew they were true. Natalie's crying stopped abruptly. What? You heard me. If they show up, I'm gone. You can't be serious. Watch me. You would leave me at the altar over this. You would ambush me with my abusers at our wedding. So yeah, I guess we're both capable of things we never thought we'd do. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay at my best man's apartment. Flynn took one look at my face and wordlessly made up the couch, then sat with me in his dimly lit living room while I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Holy shit, man," he finally said. "She actually invited them? She's been planning it for weeks." Even saying it out loud felt like betrayal. After everything you told her about why you cut them off? Apparently, she thought love would magically fix everything. I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Flynn shook his head slowly. "What are you going to do?" I told her if they show up, I won't. "Do you mean that?" I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the question. Did I mean it? Could I actually leave the woman I loved standing at the altar in front of 200 people? Could I humiliate her like that, hurt her family, waste all the money and planning and dreams we'd invested in this day? But then I thought about walking down the aisle and seeing my father's face in the crowd. I thought about trying to say vows of love and commitment while my mother watched from the front row, probably crying tears of joy for the reunion she'd helped orchestrate. I thought about the photos, the reception, having to pretend for an entire day that I was grateful for this gift, while my abusers basked in the celebration of my happiness. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I mean it." The next 2 days were a blur of ignored phone calls and increasingly desperate text messages from Natalie. She went from apologizing to justifying to bargaining to threatening. She promised to uninvite them, then explained why it was too late, then begged me to just get through the ceremony for the sake of everyone else involved. Her messages revealed the depth of her delusion. "I know you're angry, but once you see them there, supporting you, I think you'll understand why I did this. Your mother is so excited. She's been crying happy tears for days. How can you take that away from her? Everyone will be there. Your absence will hurt so many people who love you. I'm not canceling the wedding. Too much has been invested. You need to come." That last message sealed it for me. Even facing the complete destruction of our relationship, she was still trying to control the narrative, still refusing to acknowledge that what she'd done was fundamentally wrong. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in Flynn's spare bedroom, feeling strangely calm. I'd made my decision, and while it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, it was also the clearest. I couldn't marry someone who would violate my boundaries so completely and then expect me to be grateful for it. Flynn offered to drive me to the venue, to be there for moral support if I changed my mind. I appreciated the offer, but I knew that seeing the church, seeing the decorations, seeing Natalie in her wedding dress would only make this harder than it already was. Instead, I drove to a small park about 15 miles away and sat in my car, watching families have picnics and kids play on swings. Normal families. Healthy families. The kind Natalie had grown up in. The kind that made it impossible for her to truly understand why I couldn't just put things aside for one day. My phone buzzed constantly, first with messages from Natalie, then from her family, then from our mutual friends. I turned it off and sat in the growing silence, thinking about all the paths that had led to this moment. At 4:30, I knew the ceremony would have been supposed to start. At 5 o'clock, I knew they would have announced to the crowd that there would be no wedding. At 5:30, I knew Natalie was probably in a back room somewhere, still in her dress, trying to understand how the person she loved could do this to her. And I felt terrible about that. I felt terrible about the wasted money, the confused guests, the humiliation her family was experiencing. I felt terrible about hurting someone I genuinely cared about, someone who had tried to do what she thought was right. But I didn't regret my choice. Later that evening, Flynn called to check on me. He'd heard from mutual friends who'd been at the venue. "It was chaos," he said gently. Everyone was confused. Natalie's dad had to get on the microphone and tell people to go home. Your parents were there." My stomach clenched. "How did they react?" "About how you'd expect. Your dad was angry. Your mom was crying. They left pretty quickly once it was clear you weren't coming." "Did Natalie ask about me?" She's pretty destroyed, man. But she's also furious. Her family is furious. They think you humiliated her." I didn't have a choice. The words came out hollow, worn from repetition in my own mind. "I know. I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you what's happening." That night, I sat in the dark and grieved the loss of the future I'd thought I was building. Natalie and I had talked about children, about the house we'd buy, about growing old together. All of that was gone now, destroyed by her inability to respect the one boundary that mattered most to me. But underneath the grief was something else, relief. I had protected myself. I had refused to allow anyone, even someone I loved, to force me into a situation that would have been psychologically damaging. I had chosen my own well-being over the expectations and desires of others. It took me years to recognize that as strength rather than selfishness. The aftermath was brutal. Natalie's family blamed me for the financial loss and public embarrassment. Some of our mutual friends took sides. I lost relationships that I thought were solid, people who decided that my response had been disproportionate to Natalie's mistake. But I also discovered who my real friends were. Flynn never wavered in his support. My chosen family rallied around me, helping me pack up the apartment Natalie and I had shared, dealing with vendors and return gifts and all the practical debris of a canceled life. Natalie and I eventually had a conversation, weeks later, when the initial anger had cooled into something more like sadness. We met at a neutral coffee shop, both of us looking like we hadn't been sleeping well. She apologized again, and this time it felt genuine. She admitted that she'd been wrong to go behind my back, wrong to assume she knew what was best for me. But she also said something that stayed with me. I just couldn't believe that anyone could really mean to cut their parents out forever. I thought somewhere deep down, you must want them back. That's when I realized that despite 4 years together, despite all my attempts to help her understand, she had never truly grasped the reality of my childhood. She had heard my words, but filtered them through her own experience of family love and dysfunction. She couldn't conceive of parents who were genuinely harmful rather than just flawed. It wasn't entirely her fault. People who grow up in healthy families often struggle to understand that not all families are worth preserving. The cultural narrative that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that forgiveness is always possible. These ideas are so deeply ingrained that they become blind spots. But understanding why she did it didn't change what she had done. It didn't change the fact that when faced with a choice between my explicit boundaries and her romantic fantasy of reconciliation, she had chosen the fantasy. A few months later, I received an unexpected voicemail from my father. Against my better judgment, I listened to it. It was 2 minutes of pure venom. Him calling me ungrateful, selfish, embarrassing. He said I'd humiliated them in front of everyone, that I'd better never even think about coming back after what I'd pulled. Listening to that message was like being transported back to my childhood, to the fear and helplessness I'd felt growing up in that house. But it also served as confirmation that I'd made the right choice. These people hadn't changed. They weren't capable of the kind of self-reflection that would make a relationship possible. I forwarded the voicemail to Natalie, not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to hear what I'd been protecting myself from. Her response was immediate and heartbroken. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was that bad. You didn't deserve any of that." For a moment, I wondered if this revelation might change things between us. If finally understanding the true nature of my parents might make her see why her actions had been so devastating. But by then, it was too late. The trust was broken beyond repair. Even if she now understood why I'd reacted as I did, the fact remained that she had made a unilateral decision about my trauma without my consent. She had prioritized her vision of what our wedding should be over my psychological safety. In the end, we met one final time to officially end our engagement. We divided up our shared belongings, returned the ring, and said goodbye to the life we'd planned together. It was civilized and heartbreaking and absolutely necessary. Natalie told me that if she could go back in time, she would respect my wishes and never contact my parents. I believed her, but life doesn't offer do-overs, and some betrayals can't be undone with hindsight and good intentions. That was 2 years ago now. I'm still single, still healing, still learning to trust my own judgment about people and relationships. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of work on understanding my own patterns and triggers. I don't regret walking away from that altar. I regret that it came to that. Regret that someone I loved couldn't see me clearly enough to honor my boundaries. But I don't regret protecting myself from a situation that would have been genuinely harmful to my well-being. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to refuse to participate in dysfunction, even when that dysfunction is wrapped in good intentions and wedding flowers. I learned that love without understanding isn't enough. I learned that shared values matter more than shared dreams. I learned that the person who truly loves you is the one who believes you when you tell them what you need to feel safe. And I learned that walking away from someone you love, when they refuse to see you for who you really are, isn't giving up on love. It's refusing to accept a counterfeit version of it. The altar may have been empty that day, but I walked away with something more valuable than a marriage built on misunderstanding. I walked away with my dignity, my boundaries, and my unwavering commitment to my own well-being. Sometimes that has to be enough. Sometimes that's everything. Thanks for listening. And if you like this story, share it with others who might be struggling with setting boundaries in their own relationships. And don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding courage in life's most difficult moments. Remember, loving yourself is never an act of betrayal.